Good
afternoon, Ambassador. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Excellency.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. Hope all of you are doing well.
Thank you very much for joining. Yes, we were just discussing and people were sharing their stories, and Sudeep has become an expert in cutting his own hair, and we've all grown new talents. But thank you very much, Ambassador, for joining.
You're talking about the decline of business. You're getting hairdressers and barbers out of their jobs.
Well, we'll allow you to expand on that in a minute. But first of all, let me start by asking you how you are and your family. And I hope everyone, your friends and family members, are safe and healthy.
All well. Thank you, Vidya. And thanks to every one of you. I requested this meeting primarily to connect with all of you and to find out how you're doing, and to say that if we cannot meet in person, let's at least stay connected online. This is the new normal. So we all, the earlier we start adjusting to the new normal, the better it is. But I think there is good news and bad news across the world. Netherlands, the graph is going down, and that is positive news. Hopefully things will stabilize and restrictions can be lifted. But in India, they have just announced an extension of the lockdown for another 2 weeks, but still with different zones in different parts of the country. We have to see how it will all play out, and when air traffic from Netherlands back to India can resume. So that is going to be a major concern. So anyway, what I wanted to say was I'm happy to connect with all of you. I'm happy to see all of you. I hope all your families and friends are doing well. And I'm delighted that you have launched this In Conversation with Leaders. So this is the first of many more events to happen. Please keep it going. All the best for that. And congratulations on the launch of this initiative. Do you want me to straight away say something, or would you say something?
Yeah, I mean, first, thank you very much. We're very excited about the NICCT online as well, and the honor of having you inaugurate our very first launch event. So thank you for that. So what I was thinking was perhaps we can open up with the latest news, and I think the travel advisory and lifting of lockdowns per regions that you just mentioned, that is of great interest. So perhaps you can start with that and then zoom into a general overview of where we stand today in terms of the government measures. And there are some questions I'm sure that will come up later. So as far as I'm concerned, please go ahead, Ambassador.
I'm just reading the news which is flashing in front of me. Liquor shops to be open for not more than 5 people in orange zones. If anybody in NICCT is particularly interested,
yes.
Or family and friends in India.
We begin on a celebratory note.
But look, we have just got hold of this big circular from India. I will ask Mrinalini to circulate it by email to all of you. And it needs to be studied, it needs to be looked at it in detail. From what I see, the green zones and orange zones, substantive commercial activities will happen. Red zones, almost everything will be locked down. And then there are containment zones which are even more intense than a red zone, and they can be anywhere in the country. But a limited number of activities are going to remain prohibited throughout the country, irrespective of the zone. And these include travel by air, rail, metro, and interstate movement by road, running of schools, colleges, and other educational and training institutions, coaching institutions, hospitality services, hotels and restaurants, places of large public gatherings, cinema halls, malls, gymnasiums, sports complexes, religious places and places of worship. Movement of persons by air, rail, and road, it's once again repeated, it's only for select purposes and for purposes permitted by MHA. And from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m., there would be a curfew across the country. So it is a partial opening up, but still, because there are no specific restrictions other than on hotels and restaurants in terms of business activities, hopefully manufacturing can begin and trading can begin, and the cross-state movement of goods and all will be much faster and much smoother. In general, sort of going beyond the latest news from India and the gradual lifting of the restrictions, I think the direction is very clear. The government realizes that it has to permit the economy to start up once again, and there is a very high price being paid for the lockdown, not just by business and industry and the middle class and entrepreneurs, but also by the poor, who are suffering the most. So we saw yesterday a relaxation of restrictions on migrant workers and tourists who are stranded in different parts of the country. So the intention of the government is certainly to try and permit the economy to function and to lift the lockdown as we move forward. However, this has to be done keeping in mind the situation on the ground and the spread of the virus, which still remains something which people don't understand very well and whose future evolution cannot be predicted. We have before us the case of Singapore, which was considered the best example of a country which has dealt with the virus. And then they had a sudden spike amongst their migrant workers, and all restrictions had to be brought back and a complete lockdown has been imposed. India, any relaxation of restrictions will bring with it a large number of overseas Indians coming back to India. Some 3.5 lakh people have already registered to return, most of them from the Gulf. And how many of them will carry the infection, and how effectively can they be quarantined and can they be treated? We'll have to wait and watch and see what the impact of all that would be. So I think the world remains in a very uncertain phase. Someone was telling me that the Spanish flu of 1918 took 3 years to sort of it spread throughout the world. And then there was a second wave which almost killed 1 million. Science and technology has improved significantly since the days of the Spanish flu. So hopefully there should be a vaccine and a cure around the corner. Scientists across the world are racing against time to try and discover it. We are very happy that an Indian company, Serum Institute of India, the largest producer of vaccines with a subsidiary here, the Biltoven Biologicals, has decided to start production on a vaccine even before the trials are fully done, so that as soon as the trials are done, if it is confirmed, straight away it can start distributing it. It's a very noble gesture. They don't know if it'll be a waste, it'll just have to be thrown away. But still, they are taking a gamble, they are taking a risk, and they are going ahead and doing it. So if that works, then by September, people say there could be a vaccine. Otherwise, there are people also working on a cure. Let's see, we just have to wait and watch and see how things evolve in the coming days. What I would say is unavoidable and inevitable is the fact that there's going to be a recession, a global recession, a recession in India, a recession here in the Netherlands. The IMF has estimated that India will grow only at 1.9% in 2021. According to the Dutch government statistics, Dutch GDP will decrease between 1.2 and 7.7%, depending upon the length of the lockdown period. It is certain that this pandemic will trigger the reorganization of supply chains. It will accelerate the adoption of emerging technologies and innovations. It will increase the focus on health and health tech. And it will lead to a diversification of import sources or of domestic production across the world in countries. I think just a few days back, we saw that the 3 Dutch companies came together to start an initiative for manufacturing masks here in the Netherlands. And they are, at least they still will not meet the total demand of the Netherlands for masks. This is masks for health workers. But still, companies have moved quickly to try and establish a production base here and supply the needs of the government predominantly the health sector. But even there, they are discovering the problems. To certify these masks, they need somebody, an agency from UK, to come and certify, and there is no Dutch company apparently which does this kind of certification process. So there are, I think, there is going to be increased diversification of import sources as well as domestic production, reducing the reliance on China as a principal manufacturing hub. As far as India and Netherlands is concerned, both of you know that, all of you know that we are major investors in each other. The Netherlands is the second most important destination for Indian investments, and Netherlands has been the third largest investor in India in recent times. We anticipate that the pandemic will probably lead to an increase in these investments both ways. And we think there is great potential to attract even more Dutch companies to India by pointing out to the advantages that the huge Indian market offers, by explaining to them that they don't have to depend on foreign trade to the extent they are dependent, and then have a crisis of this nature disrupt their activities. And also the fact that they cannot just rely on their own small market. When you have a country of India's size and dimensions, it is an opportunity that they should not miss. So we need to redouble our efforts to attract SMEs and family-owned enterprises to India. And in this regard, the Embassy of India is currently working on a special initiative to try and reach out to SMEs. We are in the process of discussing with the government in India and trying to get approvals for the same, whereby we can have an even greater outreach towards small family-owned enterprises in the Netherlands, encouraging them to go to India and invest there. And we look forward to NICCT partnering us in that effort. In general, I think over the years, and all of you are very familiar with this, we have laid an excellent foundation to build even greater business and trade between our two countries. We have had a number of high-level visits between our countries. The state visit, the first ever state visit, took place last time with the largest ever trade mission from the Netherlands to any foreign country. Senior ministers like Sigrid Kaag and the health minister Bruna Browns, who recently stepped down, have been going to and fro quite a few times. We had the technology summit was inaugurated. So this not only lays the foundation, but it also provides the basis for follow-up. Many of your members were part of the trade mission which went to India. Many of you know what all happened there and the kind of contacts which were built. Many of you had the opportunity to network and meet people. I would say that we must build on these contacts. We must build on whatever happened during the trade mission and make this year a year of follow-up, even if it be through online meetings and online discussions of this kind. Similarly, we have had 3 chief ministers visit the Netherlands in the last 3 years, West Bengal, Himachal Pradesh and Kerala. Already with Kerala, a great deal of substantial collaboration is happening. With Himachal Pradesh, a Dutch delegation had gone to attend the Rising Himachal Summit, which was held in Himachal Pradesh. Himachal Pradesh is a state rich in fruits and vegetables. So there is great opportunity for Dutch investments in the floriculture and the horticulture sector there, which needs to be tapped. And we have received interest from the state of Uttarakhand, who is very keen to begin tulip cultivation in Uttarakhand in the higher reaches of the Himalayas on the models that Jammu and Kashmir has already done. And they are also keen on bringing more and more tourists to Uttarakhand and creating attractions like Maduro Dam there. So they had promised that they would send a delegation here. We had hoped to have them here when Kukenhof was open, but sadly all that is called off. However, whenever normalcy returns, we have already connected them to some of the leading Dutch farmers of tulips and people who are in a position to export technology and services. We hope that can be picked up and expanded. So far, the largest Indian presence in the Netherlands have been the IT companies. Many of the IT companies are reporting. We have been in close touch with them. We have had meetings with networking with them and their leadership. The feedback that we get is that while in the short term there might be a setback and there might be a go slow on many of the projects which were in the pipeline, in the long run, this pandemic is going to force more and more companies to look at change transformation. More and more companies are going to look at cutting costs. They're going to look at increased digitization of their processes, and they are also going to look at work from home environment. TCS in India has already announced a major program of work from home, and many IT companies have already implemented it in India, and this is expected to have long-term consequences within India for the price of office real estate, for traffic on the streets, and for people working from home. But I think this is a phenomenon which will grow, and this creates fresh opportunities for Indian IT companies. So there is need for increased efforts for IT companies to market their services to the Dutch public and private sector. And we expect that the number of Indians will continue to grow here. The number of knowledge workers will continue to maintain that trend of growth here over the long run. In the short term, there would be difficulties. The numbers may come down, people may go back. But in the long run, once again, we have established a good reputation here. Indian knowledge workers are known for their caliber, their skills, their dedication, and their hard work. And this presents opportunities in the future. Also, Indian students, many of them are right now, we have over 3,500 students here. Many of them are concerned and worried about what will happen with the academic year. What about the search visa? What are their employment prospects? Will the new academic year start on time? But still, I think this is a temporary trend. The Dutch universities are determined to reopen the new year on schedule if they can, if the situation permits. And if they do that, not only this year, even if this year, because of the financial situation in India being poor, if the numbers drop, in the long run, Netherlands still has a major advantage as a destination for education. It offers education in English, and it is cheaper than the US and UK. And one particular factor to also note is that Netherlands overall has handled the virus situation much better than many other European countries, including the UK and the US itself. So all these will continue to commend Netherlands as an education destination. Equally, the biggest industry here in the Netherlands which has been affected is tourism and hospitality, aviation, and floriculture. So in these industries too, I think there is need for concerted efforts to pick up from wherever the situation permits. We may have to wait till the end of the year for tourism and retail and hospitality to pick up in some way, but at least 2021 should be, I think, efforts to promote Netherlands as a destination in India, and equally India as a destination in the Netherlands, hoping that India also ultimately will come out of this situation as one of the countries which has a far better record than most others in handling the pandemic, in ensuring low infection rates, and in curbing the virus from spreading. And India as a producer of vaccines, India as a producer of medicines. We have been anxious to project the image that we are a country which exports medicines to the world, not diseases to the world. So the fact that India was willing to provide, despite its own domestic requirements, urgently needed medicines like paracetamol and NICCT to countries across the world, including as free donations to poor countries. The list of countries includes, in fact, Netherlands, to whom India permitted export of NICCT. So all this has created a positive image, which we must try and build on for increased tourist traffic, at least from 2021 onwards, there should be an effort to try and divert Dutch tourists towards India instead of their conventional destinations of south of Europe, where they have been going. And last and most important, I would say, as a result of this pandemic across the world, there's going to be increased attention on health. There's going to be more funds for health. Health companies, along with IT companies, are probably the companies which will come out of the recession the first. So I think we already had a certain amount of contacts in the field of health between India and the Netherlands. We have also had contacts in the field of Ayush, with Ayurveda and yoga being promoted here in the Netherlands, both of which we believe can contribute a lot to wellness in general and to the building of immunity in people. So health sector has to be a priority sector for our activities in the future. And it offers great scope for collaboration. There was a digital health mission which came from India to the Netherlands, from Netherlands to India last year. The Minister of Health visited Bangalore, he visited Delhi. He was very impressed with the health facilities available in India. So all this, and the Dutch have been are major players in India in the health field already. Philips is a company which is well known. It is already producing a large amount of medical equipment in India. It is keen to work with the government in public-private partnerships. It has been keen to support the massive insurance program launched by the government called Ayushman Bharat. So these and the increased demand for either PPE or ventilators or other related medical equipment in the coming days certainly provides us the opportunity to see how Netherlands and India can collaborate better in this field, using the skill, the strengths and the talents available here in the Netherlands with the market and the manpower and the scientific base which is available in India, to try and provide solutions to the world at a cost which is appropriate and which is manageable for the whole world.
True.
So I will stop here, and I will sort of be happy to take questions. I will not go into details, but let me just mention that the government has announced one set of stimulus measures in India already, and a second set focused on small and medium enterprises is expected any day from the government.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Sorry.
Yeah, okay, sorry. Thank you very much, Excellency, for the, I will pass to Vidya right after thanking you at first already for the very insightful overview. Before I would like to pass the word to Vidya, I have one personal question myself. The projected growth that you were talking about for India, contrary to the Netherlands, which is going to be expected in 2021. From what I understand, it is mostly expected to be such a growth because of the domestic focus and the possibilities of using the domestic market so much. How, as an international community, can we expect a shift in this with respect to looking more inward than outward in 2021, or has that nothing to do with it? And then I leave it to Vidya.
Well, Edith, I think, look, what we have is an estimate made by the IMF based on conditions today. We do not know what the future has in store. And that estimate is 1.9%. I think in general, IMF's estimate is India and China will grow marginally, but most other countries are going to show negative growth. All the leading economies will show negative growth. So it is too early to exactly determine what is the path which this recession is going to take. It is certainly our hope that it will be a V-shaped recovery. And IMF itself has predicted that in 2021, India will bounce back and have at least 7% growth, which we hope will be true. And then we can steadily take it up. And in terms of the government strategies, the domestic market has already been there. That has been a consistent argument from the government that look at our size, and especially now that we have implemented the GST, and created one single market, India offers huge opportunities. But going beyond that, the government is also making a big thrust on exports, offering India as an alternative provider of exports to the world for those countries who want to diversify. The government is making a big push for supply chains, more supply chains to establish themselves, as I said, and that applies to the Dutch also, so that the Indian market can be taken advantage of, and the supplies are not disrupted. Simply, if a crisis happens in one part of the world, it makes sense for people to have wider sources of their supply chains. And then to try and locate as many things as we see from the case of trying to manufacture masks here in the Netherlands. I think every country is going to try and be self-reliant to a large extent. I know I was speaking to somebody from the south of India, Kerala, a senior political leader, and he was saying they're going to launch a big program of encouraging individual households to engage in floriculture and horticulture in various forms of agriculture, because that's the state of Kerala is highly dependent on neighboring states for its fruits and vegetables to come in, and if there are restrictions on interstate movement, suddenly the state is without food. So even within one country, people are worrying about this. Within Europe, within European Union, we saw that sort of a Schengen agreement fell by the way. There was great effort to ensure that the transportation of goods remains, but still many restrictions were imposed by many countries, contrary to the principles of free movement and free trade. So here again, this Kerala example, the question I had from there was, what can we learn from the Dutch? And I said, yes, of course, the greenhouses, the Dutch are experts in farming using very little land and in an intensive manner using very little water. So this is, there are lessons which can be taken to different parts of India. So these opportunities are there. I think the domestic market argument will stay, but that doesn't mean our external engagement will stop.
Okay. So thank you very much. I thought I'll jump straight into a very practical question, Ambassador, which has to do with what it means in terms of travel restrictions to, people here who are habituated to go to India and back for their business. So maybe I can invite Rajiv, who had posed this question, to state your question to Ambassador.
Good afternoon, Ambassador. Thank you for.
Hello, Rajiv.
You did touch base on this question before, but maybe if you could elaborate, does the government have any particular date in mind when they want to open this? And would there be any quarantine measures taken once it does open? I know it's difficult to say now, but do you have any indication from the government?
I think, Rajiv, whatever information I have indicate that there would be quarantine required, and that would vary depending on whether people show symptoms or not show symptoms, whether they are permitted to quarantine themselves at home or they would have to go to a central or an official facility to be quarantined. So at least for the immediate, whoever is going back will have to probably deal with quarantine measures. And as far as opening, there has been a lot of discussions on how to manage the return. Over 350,000 people have already registered to return to India. And there is great concern that this should not lead to an otherwise relatively good performance being ruined with a whole number of new people carrying the infection and bringing it in and spreading it across the country. So if we don't have a date. We were hoping there would be some clarity, but the announcements made today indicate that for another 2 weeks, the lockdown is going to continue. Air travel is not going to begin. We will have to wait and see around end May as to what the government says afresh.
Okay, right. Just one more small thing. Some countries, I know again you already answered this question, but some countries are already thinking about imposing, tests before you even take off, corona tests, that you have a certificate you carry with it. Do you think India there's a talk like that?
There is certainly a talk like that. And I think in the case of some countries from where people were brought back in the initial phase, from Italy as well as from Iran, India sent medical teams outside, had tests conducted there, and only then permitted them to come back to the country.
Yeah, that's true.
So and in the Gulf, where we have the largest numbers, also there's a lot of talk of people being permitted to come back, provided they do a test and they show evidence of them being virus-free. So it is quite possible that such a condition is imposed by the government. What I can, I do not know whether it will ultimately come or they will say we will do the testing and the screening in India. We have to await the final instructions. But what I can assure you is that we have already consulted people here in the Netherlands, and if such a condition is imposed, they can be met without too much difficulty within the system.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Rajiv, I think you need to mute yourself because we're hearing an echo.
I'm already mute. Vidya, somebody else.
Okay. Sorry about
mute,
that.
We cannot hear you. We heard you, so you're not mute yet.
Yeah, and he's still talking, indeed. No, there was an echo of some sort. Okay, this is the hard part of online, but we're managing pretty well, I think. So I want to ask if Robert Fennechoor is still around. He said he had to step out just for 2 seconds and come back. But he had a question on investment, but I think if he's not there, then we'll just move on further. I think some of the other sort of discussion points that you raised, I found particularly interesting that this changes the rules of the game also in terms of business attractiveness. So now countries which have the capability of handling, the ongoing testing and managing, until we have a vaccine, and even after you have a vaccine, managing this will become suddenly interesting as business destinations, and that's a very important point, and also as a destination for investment, etc. And I think,
and also for travel and tourism.
Travel and tourism, which was a question I think Namita also had, is tourism is affected badly, and I don't know if Namita wants to elaborate on that question. Is there Namita? Can you maybe unmute yourself and state your question yourself, if she's there?
This is the other problem with online. You don't know if they sneak away.
Yeah, no, well,
unless they are on your screen.
But what Namita was asking was, indeed, are there particular measures that have been taken for the travel and tourism sector to keep it going? In principle, I think you answered that question to an extent, but maybe you'd like to repeat it.
Well, I think it is too premature. At this point of time, we are talking about the resumption of basic travel. Tourism cannot begin unless air travel is reasonably re-established and travel by road or by train is restarted in terms of domestic tourism. So I think it's too early to talk about tourism at this stage. We have to, first priority is to handle the pandemic. The second priority is to revive the economy and make sure that the impact of the pandemic, the recession which is expected, is ably handled, or is we ensure that its impact on business and people, especially the poorest of the poor, is as minimal as possible. And only then we can look at different sectors and their revival, especially the tourism and travel sectors. I think through the current easing up, a lot of industries and manufacturing and all will revive, but tourism and travel will probably be the last to come up.
Sure. Okay. In terms of further questions, I think there's one that I see on my screen Ritika has. Ritika, please unmute yourself and state your question.
Hi, good afternoon. Thanks for having this session. Actually, my question is not necessarily about investment or business in India. However, there are a lot of Indian passport holders with a Dutch residence permit that are currently, let's say, stuck in India, and they're unable to come back. And I think it's now been almost a month for them. What kind of steps or measures can we take to help them and also facilitate that they can come back at some point?
Well, number one, people have been coming back, both Dutch citizens as well as people with resident permits here. And they are permitted to come back according to the Dutch rules. So all they have to do is to book themselves onto the few KLM flights which are happening. KLM has been flying empty flights from the Netherlands to India because they're not permitted to take passengers from here. But they have been bringing back a large number of people from Delhi and from Mumbai. And if there are people who are outside these cities, they need to approach their local authorities, or they need to first book themselves a ticket. They need to approach local authorities, show the booking, and ask for a permit, which will enable them travel to the cities and to the airports.
Fantastic. We'll take that in mind.
This is happening. You just have to spread the word. A lot of people have sent such inquiries to us also. But considering the size of India, it is not easy for everyone to get to a Bombay or a Delhi. So there are still difficulties, but it is possible. If somebody is extremely keen to come back, they can come.
Fantastic. I'll let them know. Thank you.
So others, please join the conversation by sending me the question by chat, and then I can pull you in. Another question, Ambassador, from my side is, you see across the globe, many countries are making a real concentrated effort to pull in FDI flows into their country. One good example is Japan, which has tried now to pump in about 2.2 billion out of their approximately $1 trillion stimulus fund into pulling in FDIs and also relocating factories out of China back into Japan. Are there similar measures being taken by the Indian government to really, as you said, localize supply chains and cut dependency on global supply chains?
Absolutely. I think that is the intention of the government. And there are conversations which are happening both at the central government level as well as at the state government level, and in engagement with countries who are major industrial countries and who have big supply chain facilities in various parts of the world, to see if they are willing to look at India and what is it that they want from India, and what benefits or what facilities can India provide.
Okay. And on the same, was somebody trying to say something? No. So on the same topic, there's also been an attempt by the EU and now also recently by India to curb acquisitions by China of strategic companies or in strategic industries. So would you like to elaborate that on a bit? I think it came from the sort of HDFC stake being taken up from 0.8% to 1% by Chinese investors. So would you like to elaborate on that?
Well, there again, there is orders which have been issued by the Indian government saying that any investment from a country which has a land border with India, all countries with land borders, will have to go through one more level of scrutiny. It will not be under the automatic clearance procedure, which was what was occurring earlier, but it will have to go to the Foreign Investment Promotion Board for an approval. So none of these investments are banned or prohibited, but they will go through one more level of scrutiny and screening before they are permitted.
Okay, but that is a strategic way to sort of prevent acquisition of strategic companies.
To prevent misuse of the tragic situation and the crisis when companies' valuations are very low because of the fluctuations in the stock market.
Okay.
To sort of prevent predatory takeovers.
Yeah. Which is the same also with the US announced. I see a question from Pankaj, which has to do with again repatriation of tourists caught stranded on either side of the border. Pankaj, would you like to state your question?
Yeah. Yes, my question is on the Indians who got stuck here in Netherlands. So is there any special flight being planned or anything like that in coming weeks so that they can go back to India?
Pankaj, there is no plan for any special flight for evacuation of Indians. The KLM is still operating flights, regular commercial flights. And if and when the airport in India opens and Indians are permitted to go back, the KLM commercial flights will be the prime mode of operation.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ambassador, you mentioned that there was going to be a lot more interest in the healthcare sectors and sectors allied to healthcare. So I have Rob Neater in the audience, who has example of making informational videos on COVID. Maybe Rob, you can describe what you're doing and state your question to the ambassador.
Thanks, Vidya, for the opportunity. Mr. Ambassador, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Rob.
Nice to be in this call, really interesting. I was just, I'd like to pose the next, let's say, the following question to you. I mean, what we are doing here in the Netherlands, we make animated videos about all kind of healthcare related subjects. And for that, we have also made around 23 videos on COVID. Primarily, I mean, first targeted to the Dutch population, and especially made to reach out for people with low literacy levels, which is more or less our, let's say, expertise. Now, we have an office in Mumbai where we are developing our software, and from this office we have been doing translations in Indian English and in Hindi so far. Marathi and Kannada are on the way. Now, of course, the Indian government is also spreading lots of information across the country. But what we learned before we made these translations was that there was hardly any video, and therefore also perhaps a need for having these kind of videos available for, let's say, these people in the rural areas, in slums, with their, low literacy levels. These videos are free. I mean, there is no commercial model inside. So I'm just wondering whether you would have any advice on how to reach out to, let's say, to the public authorities in India to make them aware of the fact that these videos are there. They are there to be used. They can also be ignored. That's not the point. But if they are perceived to be useful, then the next question would be, how do we reach people? Would you just give me some advice on that?
Right. First of all, let me congratulate you and compliment you on creating these animated videos and making sure that they are also translated into different languages so that they can reach a wide audience. We would be very happy to try and help you get the information to public authorities in India. As you said, the government itself has already put a lot of information on the internet, but I think in this case, the more the merrier, the more the better. So we would be happy to look at your videos and then see how we can inform public authorities of them and suggest that they circulate it. So I would request you to please send us an email in follow-up to this discussion with the links of your videos. My colleague Mrinalini Sapra, who heads the economic wing in the embassy, will be in touch with you. We will study the videos first, and then we will inform the Ministry of External Affairs that you have created this and you're offering it to the Indian public. And we will also write to, depending upon the languages they are in, we will write to the concerned state authorities and bring it to their attention. Excuse me.
Thank you, Rob, for that question.
Yeah,
I have another question from Sudeep this time, which is following up, I think, a little bit on our question about India as an even more attractive business investment destination. Sudeep, would you like to state your question?
Thank you, Vidya. I think, as usual, you are doing excellent moderating of the session. So my compliments. Thank you very much, sir. I think it's it's the second time I'm talking to you in 2 days.
In quick succession, and you have grown a beard in between.
Right. There have been calls going on since at 6 o'clock in the morning till 10 o'clock. So, it's a side effect of work from home, I guess.
I was just realizing this is my second video conference in quick succession, and my throat is already gone.
Right. So, I think the area which I'm very interested and have been observing is the entire reorganization of a global supply chain, which you also alluded to or spoke about in your speech. And I think this is going to be one of the dominating topic in the boardrooms, and companies will look at geo concentration risks and see how they are going to mitigate some of the risks given this whatever lessons companies have learned out of this pandemic. And I think the commentary I keep hearing is that countries with a significant exposure to China and Asia Pacific, they are looking at alternatives. So my question is, what is that NICCT and Embassy can do together to be proactive in this market, to reach out to maybe the potential companies who have that significant concentration in China and Asia Pacific countries, and maybe create newer opportunities for India as well as Indian companies?
I think that's a very good idea, Sudeep, and thank you for proposing this. We would be very happy to cooperate with NICCT, and I would request all of you to sort of apply your mind as to how we should go about this. I think perhaps what we need to do is to identify a few Dutch companies with significant global supply chains, and then talk to them, create a conversation with them, and find out what is it that they look for when they establish these supply chains. Are they looking at shifting their supply chain to other countries out of China or wherever they are today? And what is it that they would look for in India? What is it that India would need to offer, or India can offer, India already offers, and what kind of what is the matrix under which they make these decisions? And then we can have a dialogue with the Indian government as required and see how we can meet their requirements. I think it will be wonderful even if we can identify one major company and persuade it to shift a part of its global chain. Already it will be a big achievement. So we need to do homework. We need to strategize on how we go about these things. We need to have a target audience, and here again, there are the big companies who are already present in India. There are companies who are probably not present in India. So we need to talk to both and see who's an ideal candidate, who's a prime candidate for more work in this regard. Let me also mention that the Invest India, the organization in India, its main purpose is also helping people invest in India and move their supply chains to India. And I'm sure they would be a very willing partner for us, including people like CII and others.
Right. So thank you, Edith. I think it's very good that deliberate on this, and I think NICCT has a great opportunity to play a leadership role, and maybe collaborate with Invest India to play a role in, be proactive and and try to find opportunities for India as well as Indian companies.
I entirely agree. It is if we are to look at an outcome out of this discussion, and if we have to look at an action point, this could be very well it if NICCT can decide if you can put together a team which can then have a conversation with a few key individuals in a few leading companies, and then on the basis of that drop a strategy of how we work on this project further. As we speak, I was just recalling a discussion I had with the Royal Philips, where I was told that there was a major Indian private entrepreneur who had contacted them asking if they could manufacture ventilators in India, and Philips could license. Philips is dealing with a situation, all ventilator manufacturers are dealing with a situation where for the next 1 or 2 years, they cannot meet demands. They have to rapidly expand production. But then they are all looking at whether it makes more sense for them to expand production within existing facilities or to create new facilities elsewhere under the current lockdown conditions. So both during the lockdown, or like if we say prepare for the post-lockdown phase, then certainly if some preliminary contacts have already been made, we could build on that, and Indian industry, I'm sure, would also be very willing partners in such an effort.
May
Thank
may I add to that? And it is an amazing initiative which is coming out of this being together to see how we can add value to bringing more big companies to India, especially looking for supply chains. I would like to inform you that NICCT has been invited to the table of various bilateral chambers in the Netherlands, which meet bi-weekly to inform other chambers as well on what they're dealing with in their countries with respect to the Netherlands and the foreign countries such as China, Russia, and so on. And there we also tell each other what the biggest problems are in the respective countries, what the measures are, and so on and so on. So we could definitely bring back some points in which other countries are stuck and help them and their companies to solve their problems by having their supply chain in India instead of, let's say, for example, China.
Okay. Ambassador.
Just one more quick comment here, Edith and Ambassador Sir. You know, I think the recent Facebook investment in Geo is a great example of how a global enterprise like Facebook can come to India and how they can invest and create bigger opportunities. And I think, you know, this is a great case study, and I think we must take initiative to maybe create a collateral or document it and maybe share it with the wider Dutch large entities, because this is a great example of how kind of a large enterprise like Facebook can come in and capitalize on the potential which exists in India, especially in the retail space.
Absolutely.
Great.
Absolutely. Yeah, great. Thanks.
I really like it when a concrete call for action comes out of our meeting. So
I was remembering the earlier Amazon takeover of which was it? There's a huge investment which came from Amazon.
Flipkart.
Flipkart. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, but many companies are considering, you heard about Apple teaming up with Foxconn, which is in Taiwan, which is not that far away from China, but they're definitely making moves away from. So this is definitely one to watch. And I agree with Sudeep that this is something that we should look towards taking a really proactive role in and work on it. So that's definitely action for us. Ambassador, if your throat permits, if I can ask one question which was sent to me by Robert, who for some reason is not there right now. I think he got cut off, but I'll just state his question because this is being recorded. You're in. Okay. Will you then quickly, as the last question, I think for today's session, please bring in your question. Yeah.
Yes, please. Good afternoon, Excellency.
Good afternoon,
everybody. I asked a question with regard to the investments in infrastructure. It relates to the near bankruptcy of a big shadow bank, ILFS, in India, that caused quite some troubles and was handled very proactively by the Mr. Modi administration. Now, I was wondering, ILFS was very much involved in investing into infrastructure. Is there still a need for foreign capital to be invested into Indian infrastructure? Basically, that's my question. And what is the stance of the Modi administration with regard to reaching out to European investors in particular?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Infrastructure is the topmost priority. There is recognition across the country in the government, in business, in economic circles, that what is holding India back is lack of good quality infrastructure, and that infrastructure is critical for growth of virtually every other sector of the economy. So I would say that infrastructure is absolutely the top priority for the government. There we would welcome as much foreign investment as possible in infrastructure. foreign investment has been coming in, but considering the size and scale of India and our huge needs, sometime back, I think if I remember a figure of several years back, there was an estimate of $3 trillion or so, which India can easily absorb within a period of 5 to 10 years. So the demand is huge, money is welcome, and we would love to have more European investments in India. Let me mention that the government has specifically created a National Infrastructure Investment Fund. While this is created by the government in the sense that the initial investment is from the government, it is run purely on a corporate private fund basis, and they are welcome to get investments from other funds also. So they have already been successful in mobilizing money from the Abu Dhabi Investment Authority and from pension funds in Canada, which is then being plowed back into development of ports, development of highways, etc. in India. So the Infrastructure Investment Fund we have already had some discussions with Dutch pension funds about the Infrastructure Investment Fund. The feedback we had got from them is that they like what is happening. They like the institution. They think it is very professionally done on the model it should be done, and it happens anywhere in the world. But then pension funds, being pension funds, are cautious, and they didn't want to commit to putting their money into it immediately. But they said we will continue to watch it, and at an appropriate time they would be happy to consider investments there. So this is just one opportunity which we have tried to tap here. We have also repeatedly spoken to the Dutch government about the need to try and to encourage surplus funds available in the Netherlands into infrastructure in India, which would be long-term investment eliciting good returns for those investing there. And so we are open to all investments from Europe.
Okay.
And on the infrastructure fund, if that route is chosen, they are even willing to provide for significant investors a seat on the management table. Since it is still a fledgling institution, they have extended this welcome, and that is what is happening with ADIA. Saying that if it is like a premier fund with a significant investment, they are willing to discuss the future deployment of resources of those funds and long-term returns by also including whoever is investing in the NIIF as part of the board.
Yes. Thank you. If I may ask another additional question.
Yes, please.
We have just a couple of minutes, so please make it short because we like to close.
I was about to ask if you're ready to sign a check for a few $1 billion.
Robert, this is your chance.
Well, if I had, I would be definitely inclined to invest part of it into Indian infrastructure. The final question then. I'm not sure, but I may have noticed some fatigueness in India when reaching out to Europe. I've noticed that Canada and the Middle East are more favorable geographies to which the Mr. Modi administration would reach out for investments. I'm not sure, and is this something that you recognize, and how is that something that you could explain, or don't you see the same?
Right. I think it is not a question of India being reluctant to reach out. We are very anxious to reach out, and we are reaching out in every which way possible. In fact, our message to Europe is please do not underestimate yourself. You have achieved something very significant in the form of the European Union. Your collective economic strength makes you a major pole in the world, and you have a political voice which you have hardly exercised till now. So we would like Europe to assert itself more. We would like Europe to involve itself more. We are very keen to have an investment and trade agreement with European Union, which has been bogged down in the negotiations. And we would like all European countries and European businesses, we welcome them to play a much more active role in India. If it appears that the Middle East or Canada is more active, it is because they have been proactive. And that proactiveness, unfortunately, perhaps is not adequate here in Europe. Europe has been bogged down in its own problems. It has been conventionally focused on the Atlantic and the US. Because it is this rich market within itself, a lot of trading and investments happen within the European continent. And then Brexit has bogged you down a lot, not to mention US sanctions and whatnot. So Europe has been, and now the pandemic. So Europe has been distracted. But we would love to have you come into India in a much bigger way. And we are happy to do whatever it takes to encourage you to come in.
Thank you very much.
Great.
Thank you. Please stay in close touch with us, and we would be happy to work with you in getting infrastructure investments into India.
Thank you.
Great. So that brings us to the end of our session today. So I'd like to say thank you to everybody and the ambassador. I'm going to give it over to Edith now to make any closing remarks and remind you that after we stop the formal part of this session, we're going to keep the channel open for just informal chatting for, let's say, 15-20 minutes. Pour yourself a drink and stay there. Thanks, everyone. Edith, over to you. Thank you, Ambassador.
I have to unmute myself, of course. Well, thank you very much, Vidya. Thank you very much, Your Excellency. There is no better way to end the week like with you and everybody on this call like we did now, because we get a lot of, I don't want to use the fake word news, but we get a lot of bad news on the television every day of the pandemic and how it is hitting people's health and the economy. So it is wonderful to have you as our conversation with a great leader today, to have an encouraging voice in these challenging times, and the message to work together and to use these times as a opportunity to develop new chances and creating new ideas right on the way on this panel right today, which we'll certainly take forward. NICCT and our members are extremely grateful that you took the time to be with us here and to share our thoughts and engage us in good conversation. And we are very much looking forward to forming a new group together with the embassy and a new emphasis on bringing a new business to India where we can, and getting a positive result out of the situation that we have. Thank you very much for that, and looking forward to keeping in conversation with you and the embassy.
Edith, Vidya, if I can just add one word. It would be useful if you can identify maybe one or two people who could perhaps in follow-up discuss with Mrinalini, who you could target on the supply chain issue.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Mr. Robert, again, Mrinalini is the contact person for you to discuss infrastructure investments further.
Yeah, I will gladly do that.
So thank you everyone. I wondered what this informal networking was all about and how it works online. Now I realize I should have been at home instead of my office and had a glass in my hand. But anyway, so
that's all there is
to all of you.
It's unmoderated chatting, that's it. So anybody who wants to hang around, and we need to create opportunities to just talk with each other. So that's it. So thank you again, everybody, and lovely to have you, and see you next on the 7th.
There's one more.
Vidya, I think inspired by your informal networking, one more idea for you. Maybe you should have a TGIF. NICCT, thank God it's a Friday evening online networking.
We're doing it on a Thursday. We call it digital drinks, and we're going to do it every Thursday instead of Friday. But
Okay.
yes, we've along those lines. Yes. Sorry, Edith, you were saying something, I think.
Yes, exactly. I would like to thank you, Vidya, for the
Oh.
great moderating job. Sudeep already mentioned it, but I would like to mention it as well. Very nicely done. Perfect. Great forum here.
I
Thank
need a
you.
drink now. So, no, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Have a great weekend.
Yes.
Stay
Thank
safe,
you.
stay healthy.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.
Channel is open, guys, if people want to stay and chat. So we are still with 5 people. Who's
Hello.
I'm bringing Patricia a drink.
I'm gonna get myself a drink.
Hey,
Yes, we couldn't
Yoko.
do this without you and Artu, really. Thank you a lot for your help.
Thank you so much.